After 6 years in the Middle East building fortresses for generals, I came home to build a life with my daughter, Sarah. I expected hugs and tears of joy. I expected to see the architect I raised standing tall in the doorway of the Victorian mansion I bought for her. I did not expect to find a broken woman on her knees in a maid uniform scrubbing the floor of her own house. And when I reached out to touch her shoulder, she flinched and called me sir. That was the moment I realized I had not returned to a home. I had walked into a crime scene. Before I tell you how I tore their world apart brick by brick, let me know in the comments if you have ever had to fight for someone who could not fight for themselves. Hit like and subscribe if you believe justice is a dish best served cold. My name is Rexford Dalton, and I am 71 years old. Most men my age are worrying about their golf handicap or their blood pressure medication. I was worrying about how much structural damage a family could sustain before it collapsed completely. The taxi ride from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport felt like it took a lifetime. The rain hammered against the windows, a relentless gray drumbeat that matched the rhythm of my heart. I had been away too long. 6 years of consulting on infrastructure projects in conflict zones where the sand gets into your soul and the heat melts your patience. I told myself I was doing it for Sarah. I told myself I was securing her future, amassing a fortune so she would never have to work a day in her life unless she wanted to. But as the taxi wound its way up the private drive of the Queen Anne estate, I realized the truth. I had been running away from the memory of my wife's funeral, running away from the silence of an empty house. I paid the driver and stood in the rain staring up at the house. It was magnificent. The slate roof gleamed wet and dark. The brickwork was impeccable. I had transferred the deed to Sarah 5 years ago, a wedding gift when she married Blake Anderson. A real estate developer, she said. A man with vision, she said. I had my doubts, but I was 5,000 miles away, and her voice sounded happy on the phone. I wanted her to be happy. I walked up the stone steps, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder. I did not ring the bell. I still had my key, the heavy brass key Sarah had mailed me years ago, saying this would always be my home too. I wanted to surprise her. I wanted to see her face light up before she could compose herself. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The foyer was warm and smelled of lemon polish and expensive lilies. Crystal chandeliers cast a prism of light across the marble floors. It was silent. Too silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of a held breath. I walked toward the living room, expecting to see Sarah at her drafting table, or perhaps entertaining guests. Instead, I saw a figure huddled near the fireplace. A woman. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing a spot on the hardwood floor with a frantic intensity. She wore a gray uniform, the kind you see in old movies or high-end hotels. A white apron was tied around her waist. It was filthy, stained with grease and cleaning fluids. "Excuse me," I said, my voice echoing in the cavernous room. "I am looking for Sarah Anderson." The woman froze. Her shoulders hunched up as if expecting a blow. She turned her head slowly, and the air left my lungs. It was Sarah. But it was not my Sarah. My Sarah had bright eyes and a spine of steel. This woman looked 20 years older than her 34 years. Her hair was chopped short and uneven. Her skin was sallow, stretched tight over her cheekbones. And her eyes. There was no light in them, only a dull, terrified haze. "Sarah," I whispered, dropping my bag. "It is me. It is Dad." She did not smile. She did not rush to me. She scrambled backwards, scuttling across the floor like a frightened animal until her back hit the sofa. She held the scrub brush up like a shield. "Please, sir," she stammered, her voice raspy and broken. "I am hurrying. The spot is almost gone. Please do not tell Mr. Anderson. I will lose my credits for the day. I will not eat. Please, sir." I took a step forward, my hands shaking. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" Look at me. It is your father. I am home. She blinked rapidly, trying to process the information, but the wall of fear was too thick. She looked at my boots. You are wearing shoes on the floor, she whispered, horrified. Mr. Anderson forbids shoes. You are making it dirty. I have to clean it. I have to clean it before he sees. She lunged forward not to hug me, but to wipe the non-existent mud from my boots with her apron. I grabbed her wrists. They were thin as twigs. And then I saw them. Bruises. Old yellow ones and fresh purple ones blooming like dark flowers up her forearms. My combat instincts flared hot and violent. Someone had put their hands on my daughter. Someone had turned my brilliant architect into a trembling servant in her own home. Who did this? I growled, the sound rumbling deep in my chest. Sarah, who did this to you? Before she could answer, the sound of slow, deliberate clapping came from the grand staircase. I looked up. Descending the stairs was a man in a bespoke navy suit. He looked impeccable. Every hair was in place. He wore a smile that did not reach his eyes. Beside him was a woman I did not know. Younger, sharp features. She wore a silk blouse and held a clipboard, looking at me with the disdain one reserves for a stray dog. Blake Anderson, I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm before a mortar strike. Rexford seeing you here is a surprise, Blake said, continuing his descent. We did not expect you for another week. Or perhaps never. The reports said the situation in the region was volatile. I released Sarah's hands gently and stood to my full height. I am 6'2" and I have built bridges under sniper fire. I do not shrink before men in Italian suits. What is this, Blake? Why is my daughter wearing a maid uniform? Why is she terrified of me? Blake sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. He reached the bottom of the stairs and brushed a speck of lint from his lapel. It is complicated, Rex. Sarah has been unwell. Very unwell. Since you abandoned her to chase money in the desert, her mind has fractured. We are trying a new therapy. Occupational therapy. Routine. Structure. Hard work to ground her in reality. Therapy, I spat, pointing at Sarah, who had curled into a ball on the floor. You call beating her therapy. You call treating her like a slave therapy. I took a step toward him, my fists clenching. I was going to break his jaw. I was going to tear that smug smile off his face. But before I could close the distance, two men stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. They were big, thick-necked private security types. They blocked my path, their hands resting near their waists, suggesting concealed weapons. Careful, Rex, Blake said, his voice dropping an octave. You are a guest. An uninvited guest. Do not make me call the authorities. A violent old man with a history of PTSD attacking a respected businessman. It would not look good on the news. I looked at the bodyguards, then back at Blake. I assessed the tactical situation. 2 hostiles, 1 primary target. I could take them. But Sarah was right there. If a fight broke out, she would be collateral damage. I forced my muscles to relax. I needed intel before I launched an offensive. She does not recognize me, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Dissociative amnesia, Blake said smoothly. A side effect of her condition. And the medication. Monica here manages her daily regimen. The woman with the clipboard stepped forward. She looked at Sarah with cold, clinical eyes. Subject 894, get up, Monica commanded. You are disturbing the guest. Go to your quarters. Sarah scrambled to her feet instantly. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. She did not look at me. She kept her head bowed and hurried toward a door that led to the basement. Sarah, wait, I called out. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. She trembled but did not turn around. Go, Blake barked. Sarah vanished behind the door. The click of the lock was the loudest sound in the room. I turned back to Blake. My rage was a cold knot in my stomach. You are living in her house, spending her money and treating her like a prisoner. You think I will let this stand? Blake laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Her house. Her money. Oh, Rex, you really have been out of the loop, haven't you? Sarah signed everything over to me 3 years ago. When her episodes started, she realized she was unfit to manage the estate. She gave me power of attorney. She gave me the company. She gave me everything to protect it from herself. He walked over to a wet bar and poured himself a glass of amber liquid. He did not offer me one. As for you taking her, Blake continued, taking a sip. You are welcome to try. But you should know she is under a court-ordered conservatorship. If you try to remove her, it is kidnapping. And frankly, Rex, she is a liability. Last month, she set fire to the garage, caused $100,000 in damages. She owes the estate. She is working off her debt. Debt, I repeated incredulously. She is your wife. She is an employee, Blake corrected. An employee who is currently failing to meet her performance targets. He set the glass down and looked at me with a predatory glint. Look, I am not a monster. You are her father. You can stay the night. We have a guest room prepared. Spend some time with her. See for yourself how far she has fallen. Maybe then you will understand why I had to take control. He was baiting me. He wanted me to explode. He wanted me to give him a reason to call the police and have me arrested. He knew that if I was in a cell, I could not help Sarah. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I had to be smart. I had to be the engineer, not the soldier. I needed to find the cracks in his foundation. Fine, I said. I will stay. Monica smirked. I will show you to your room. Do not wander around at night, Mr. Dalton. The security system is very sensitive. It might mistake you for an intruder. I followed her up the grand staircase, the same stairs my daughter should have been walking down as a queen. Instead, she was in the basement, and I was being led to a cage. The guest room was luxurious. King-sized bed, silk curtains, a view of the Space Needle in the distance. But as soon as the door closed, I began my sweep. I checked the smoke detector, camera, I checked the vent, microphone, I checked the window. It was locked and reinforced with security film. This was not a guest room. It was a holding cell with high thread count sheets. I sat on the edge of the bed and put my head in my hands. The image of Sarah on her knees burned behind my eyelids. The bruises, the fear. They had broken her. They had spent years dismantling her spirit, while I was thousands of miles away thinking I was providing for her. Guilt washed over me, a tidal wave of heavy black water. I had failed her. I had protected her from poverty, but I had left her open to predators. But guilt is a useless emotion. Guilt does not break locks. Guilt does not destroy men like Blake Anderson. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked city. Blake thought he had won. He thought I was just a tired old man with a heavy bag and a broken heart. He thought he held all the cards because he had the legal papers and the hired muscle. He was wrong. He forgot what I did for a living. I did not just build things. I specialized in controlled demolition. I knew how to bring down massive structures by identifying the weak points and placing the charges exactly where they needed to be. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an old satellite model, rugged and untraceable. I had no signal in this fortress. I needed to get out. I needed to find Leonard Katz, my old lawyer, the only man in Seattle I could trust. But first, I needed to survive the night. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, my boots still on. I stared at the camera lens hidden in the smoke detector. I knew Blake was watching. Let him watch. Let him think I was sleeping. Let him think I was defeated. Tomorrow I would start the assessment. I would find out where the money went. I would find out what drugs they were pumping into my daughter's veins. And I would find out exactly how much pressure it would take to crush Blake Anderson into dust. The house was quiet again. But now I could hear something else. Faintly through the floorboards, I heard sobbing, a low continuous sound of pure misery rising from the basement. It was the fuel I needed. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I began to plan. Step 1, secure the asset. Step 2, isolate the threat. Step 3, execute with extreme prejudice. They wanted a maid. They wanted a senile old man. They were about to get a war. The rain continued to fall, washing away the dust of the desert, but it could not wash away the stain of this betrayal. That would require something stronger than water. The dining room was a theater of cruelty, disguised as a family meal. The long mahogany table, which I had imported from Italy for Sarah's 30th birthday, was set for 3. Crystal wine glasses caught the light of the chandelier. Silver cutlery gleamed on silk napkins, but there was no place setting for the owner of the house. I sat on the right side of the table, my hands resting flat on the cold wood. Blake sat at the head, looking like a king on a stolen throne. Monica sat opposite me, applying a fresh coat of red lipstick, using her knife as a mirror. The air smelled of roasted rosemary lamb and expensive cologne, but underneath it all was the stale scent of fear. The kitchen door swung open. Sarah walked in carrying a heavy silver tureen. The weight of it made her arms tremble. She had changed out of the gray uniform, but what she wore was worse. It was a black dress that was too large for her, hanging off her skeletal frame like a shroud. She did not look at me. She did not look at anyone. Her eyes were fixed on the soup tureen, as if carrying it without spilling was the most important mission of her life. "Careful now," Blake said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Do not embarrass us, Sarah. Remember what happened last time you spilled." Sarah flinched. The silver rattled against the china as she set the tureen down on the sideboard. She moved with the jerky, unnatural stiffness of someone who expects pain at any moment. I watched her hands. They were red and chapped, the hands of a scullery maid, not an architect. She picked up a ladle. "Serve the guest first," Monica commanded, not looking up from her phone. "And do not drip on the tablecloth. It is Egyptian cotton." Sarah moved to my side. I could hear her breathing. It was shallow and rapid, like a panicked bird. I smelled the harsh chemical scent of bleach clinging to her skin, masking her natural perfume of vanilla and jasmine that I remembered. She ladled the steaming bisque into my bowl. Her hand shook violently. A single drop of orange liquid landed on the rim of the plate. Sarah gasped. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a rag, instantly wiping the spot away. "I am sorry, sir," she whispered. "I am so sorry." "It is fine, Sarah," I said softly. "It is just soup." She froze at the sound of my voice. For a second her eyes flickered toward me, and I saw a ghost of recognition, a spark of the daughter who used to build pillow forts with me. But then Blake cleared his throat. It was a sharp, percussive sound that snapped the invisible tether between us. Sarah's eyes went dead again. She moved to serve Monica. Monica waited until Sarah was leaning over her. Then, with a movement so subtle I almost missed it, she shifted her elbow. She bumped Sarah's arm. The ladle tipped. Hot bisque splashed onto the table, and a few drops landed on Monica's bare wrist. "You clumsy idiot!" Monica shrieked, jumping up and knocking her chair back. "You burned me! Look what you did!" I knew she did it on purpose. I saw the malicious glint in her eyes before she screamed. But Sarah did not defend herself. She dropped the ladle and fell to her knees, pressing her forehead against the floor. "Please forgive me," she sobbed. "I am clumsy. I am stupid. Please do not lock me in the quiet room." Blake stood up, sighing theatrically. He walked over to Monica and inspected her wrist. There was not even a mark. He kissed it gently, then turned his cold gaze to Sarah. "This is what I was telling you," Rex Blake said, shaking his head. "She cannot control her motor functions. She is a danger to herself and others. We try to give her a normal evening and she ruins it." He looked down at his wife, who was trembling on the floor. Sarah, clean it up, now. I gripped the edge of the table. The wood groaned under the pressure of my fingers. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to launch myself across the table. I wanted to drive my fork into Blake's hand. I wanted to smash Monica's face into the soup she had spilled. The violence inside me was a physical thing, a dark animal clawing at the bars of my ribcage. But I did nothing. I sat there like a statue. If I attacked them now, they would call the police. They would show the footage of Sarah's unstable behavior. They would paint me as the aggressor. I would be in jail by midnight, and Sarah would be alone with them forever. I had to endure this. I had to let the poison enter my system so I could synthesize the antidote. Sarah scrambled to her feet. She did not grab a towel. She grabbed the napkins from our laps. She began to wipe the table, her movements frantic and desperate. She scooped the hot spilled soup into her bare hands to keep it from dripping onto the rug. The heat must have been searing, but she did not flinch. She was immune to small pains now. Disgusting. Monica sneered, sitting back down. I have lost my appetite. Blake sat down as well, ignoring Sarah, who was now crawling under the table to check for drips. He picked up his wine glass and swirled the dark red liquid. So, Rex, let us talk about the future, Blake said, as if his wife was not currently beneath his feet wiping the floor. I assume you came back because you ran out of money. The construction business in the Middle East dried up years ago. I can help you. I am generous. I can set you up in a small apartment downtown. Something quiet. Assisted living, perhaps. I looked at him. He was trying to assert dominance. He was trying to buy me off with pocket change. He had no idea he was talking to a man who had negotiated contracts with warlords. I am not here for charity, Blake, I said, keeping my voice level. I am here to see my daughter. Blake laughed. He nudged Sarah with his foot under the table. She flinched, but stayed silent. You are seeing her. This is her reality, Rex. But let us be honest. You are old. You do not understand modern finance. You bought this house with brick and mortar money. Old money. I have leveraged this asset into something much bigger. I am building an empire. Crypto, NFTs, high-yield private equity. He leaned forward, his eyes shining with the manic light of a gambler who thinks he has a system. In fact, I am closing a deal next week that will triple our net worth, Blake bragged. A major conglomerate is buying my firm. The Anderson Group will be global. And do you know what the best part is? I built it all with Sarah's inheritance. She was sitting on a gold mine, and she was too afraid to dig. I liberated that capital. He was confessing. He was so arrogant he did not even realize he was handing me the ammunition. He admitted to using her inheritance. He admitted to leverage. In my mind, I was recording every word. And what happens to Sarah when you sell? I asked, glancing down. Sarah had finished cleaning. She was kneeling beside Blake's chair, waiting for permission to leave. She goes where I go, Blake said, patting her head as if she were a retriever. She needs me. Without my guidance, she would be institutionalized. The state would take everything. I am her guardian angel. Monica giggled. She took a piece of bread and tore off a chunk. She dropped it on the floor next to Sarah. Oops, Monica said. Butterfingers. Sarah looked at the bread. She looked at Blake. Blake nodded slightly. Eat it, Sarah, Blake said softly. You worked hard cleaning that mess. You deserve a reward. I stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to that piece of bread on the Persian rug. This was not just abuse. This was dehumanization. They were breaking her connection to humanity. They wanted her to believe she was a dog, so she would never stand up like a human. Sarah hesitated. Her eyes met mine under the table. For a second, I saw the shame burning in them. She knew. Somewhere deep inside the fog of drugs and trauma, she knew this was wrong, but the fear was stronger. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the bread. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I am not hungry," I said. Blake looked up, smiling. "Suit yourself." "More lamb for me." I walked out of the dining room. I did not run. I walked with the measured pace of a man inspecting a structural failure. I heard them laughing behind me. I heard Monica make a joke about how the apple does not fall far from the tree. I walked into the hallway and leaned against the wall. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I needed to calm down. I needed to think. The rage was blinding me, and I could not afford to be blind. I pulled the small burner phone from my pocket. I checked the battery. It was fully charged. I looked at the security keypad on the wall near the kitchen. It was a standard Honeywell system. I had installed similar ones in Kabul. I knew the default engineer codes. I knew how to bypass the silent alarm. But not yet. Tonight was reconnaissance. Tonight was about gathering intelligence. I went up the stairs to my prison cell of a bedroom. I did not turn on the light. I stood by the window and watched the rain streak the glass. Below me in the dining room, the monsters were feasting. They thought they had broken the Dalton family. They thought they had extinguished the fire. They were wrong. They had just poured gasoline on the embers. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. I looked old. My face was lined with the geography of hard years, but my eyes were clear. The hesitation I had felt at the airport was gone. The guilt was gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. I would not just save Sarah. I would destroy Blake Anderson. I would dismantle his life piece by piece. I would take his money. I would take his reputation. I would take his freedom. And when he was lying in the dirt with nothing left but his expensive suit and his arrogance, I would make sure he remembered the taste of bread on the floor. I took out a small notebook from my bag. I wrote down 3 things. 1. The drugs. I needed to switch them. 2. The money. I needed to find where he was hiding it. 3. The pride. I needed a way to make him sell the house to me without knowing it was me. I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I could hear the faint sound of dishes being washed in the kitchen. Sarah was still working. "Hold on, baby girl," I whispered into the darkness. "Daddy is home, and school is in session." The night dragged on. I listened to the house settle. I heard Blake and Monica come upstairs laughing. I heard their door close. I heard the silence return. But it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a fuse burning down. Tomorrow I would find Leonard. Tomorrow I would become the ghost in their machine. Tonight I let them sleep. It would be the last peaceful sleep they would ever have. The wind howled outside, battering the house, but the foundation held. I built this house to survive storms. I just had to get rid of the termites eating it from the inside. I waited until the digital clock on the bedside table read 3 in the morning. The house was finally silent. The aggressive rain had softened to a steady weeping against the reinforced glass. I had not slept. Sleep is a luxury for the innocent, and tonight I was neither innocent nor safe. I was an insurgent in enemy territory. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, my boots laced tight. I had spent the last 4 hours listening to the rhythm of the house, learning its breathing patterns. The central heating unit kicked on every 45 minutes with a low rumble. The security patrol car passed on the street below, every hour on the hour. Blake and Monica had stopped moving around upstairs at midnight. It was time. I moved to the door. It was locked from the outside. A simple privacy lock they thought would hold an old man. They forgot that locks are just mechanical puzzles, and I have been solving puzzles since I was a boy. I slid a thin metal shim I had fashioned from the clip of my pen between the door and the frame. I felt the latch mechanism. I applied pressure. Not force, just leverage. With a soft click, the tongue of the lock slid back. I turned the handle slowly, timing the movement with the rumble of the heating system to mask any sound. The hallway was bathed in the ghostly green glow of the emergency exit lights. I kept my back to the wall, moving through the blind spots of the cameras I had identified earlier. The floorboards were old, but I knew where the joists were. I stepped only on the solid points, moving like smoke toward the kitchen. The basement door was there, a heavy oak slab that looked more like the entrance to a dungeon than a part of a home. It was locked too. A deadbolt this time. But I had my key. The key Sarah had sent me 5 years ago. I prayed they had not changed the cylinder. I slid the brass key in. It met resistance. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wiggled it slightly, applying gentle torque. The tumblers fell into place. The lock turned. I opened the door, and the smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of a neglected institution. Damp concrete, mold, stale urine, and beneath it all the sharp chemical tang of industrial disinfectant. It was the smell of despair. I descended the wooden stairs. They creaked under my weight, and I froze, counting to 10, waiting for a reaction from above. Silence. I continued down into the darkness. I pulled my penlight from my pocket and clicked it on, shielding the beam with my fingers to create a narrow, focused sliver of light. The beam cut through the gloom and landed on a scene that will haunt me until my dying day. This was not a guest suite. This was not a bedroom. It was a cell. The walls were bare concrete, weeping with moisture. There were no windows. In the corner sat a plastic bucket. In the center of the room, on a thin, soiled mattress, lay my daughter. She was curled into a fetal position, shivering beneath a single thin blanket. Her breathing was ragged, a wet, rattling sound that spoke of untreated bronchitis or worse. I moved closer, my boots making no sound on the cold cement. I knelt beside the mattress. "Sarah," I whispered. She did not stir. I shone the light on her face. Her skin was translucent, pale as paper. Her lips were cracked and dry. But it was her arms that made the bile rise in my throat. She had kicked off the blanket in her sleep, and her sleeves were pushed up. I gently took her left arm. The skin was a roadmap of abuse. There were fresh bruises, purple and yellow, blooming like rotten fruit. But amidst the bruises were small red puncture marks. Needle tracks. Not in the veins like a junkie, but in the muscle. Deltoid, bicep, thigh. I touched the injection sites. Some were inflamed, hot to the touch. They were injecting her. But with what? Blake had said she was on medication. But you do not inject legitimate medication in a basement in the middle of the night, leaving tracks like this. These were sedatives, muscle relaxants, or perhaps hallucinogens designed to keep her disoriented, to manufacture the very insanity they claimed she suffered from. I looked around the room for evidence. On a rusty metal shelf bolted to the wall, I found a clipboard. I shone my light on it. It was a ledger, a handwritten log of expenses and debts. I read the entries and my hands began to shake with a cold, murderous rage. October 14th, food and lodging, $500. October 15th, cleaning supplies, $50. October 15th, penalty for broken glass, $200. October 16th, medication dose, $1,000. At the bottom of the page was a running total. It was in the hundreds of thousands. And below that, a signature. Sarah's signature. But it was shaky, barely legible, as if her hand had been forced or she had been too drugged to hold the pen. They were charging her to live in her own prison. They were manufacturing a debt so massive she could never leave. They were building a paper trail to show a judge that she was financially irresponsible and dependent on Blake's charity. I heard a rustle from the mattress. I turned back. Sarah's eyes were open. They were wide, staring into the darkness, but seeing nothing. The pupils were blown wide, swallowing the irises. She looked straight at me, but there was no recognition. No, she whimpered, shrinking back against the wall. No more medicine. Please, Monica. My arm hurts. I will be good. I promise I will be good. Sarah. It is me, I said, keeping my voice low and soothing. It is Dad. I am not Monica. I am not Blake. She shook her head violently. You are tricking me. You always trick me. You say you are Dad, but then you use the needle that makes the spiders come. My heart shattered. Hallucinogens. They were giving her psychotropic drugs to induce visions to make her terrified of her own shadow. No wonder she thought I was a threat. To her, reality was a shifting nightmare, where faces changed and loved ones became monsters. I reached out to touch her hand. She flinched, as if I had burned her. I signed the paper, she babbled, her words slurring. I signed the fire paper. I admitted it. I burned the garage. Blake said if I signed, he would let me sleep upstairs. But he lied. He always lies. I froze. The fire. Blake had mentioned she set fire to the garage, but here she was saying she signed a confession under duress. Did you start the fire, Sarah? I asked gently. She began to rock back and forth. Blake gave me the lighter. He put it in my hand. He said, "Hold this while I take a picture." Then he dropped the rag. The fire was so hot. He laughed. He took the picture and said, "Now I own you. If you try to leave, I will show the police. I will show them the crazy arsonist." I closed my eyes. It was a setup, a classic frame job. He staged the crime, documented her presence, and used it as blackmail. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was airtight. Unless I broke the seal. Sarah continued to mutter. He is selling the house. I heard him. He is selling the house to the Vulture Fund. He says I have to leave. He says I have to go to the state hospital, the one with the metal beds. Please do not let him send me there. I will work harder. I will scrub the floors until they bleed. Just let me stay. I grabbed her shoulders firmly, stopping her rocking. I needed her to hear me. I needed to plant a seed of truth in the garden of lies they had planted in her mind. Sarah, look at me. She blinked, trying to focus. Tears leaked from her eyes, running down her hollow cheeks. I am real. I am here. And I know about the land. Her breath hitched. The land, she whispered. Yes. The land under the house. The rights. Do you remember what we did? Before the wedding. The trust. Her brow furrowed. The fog in her mind thinning for just a second. The trust, she repeated. The box. The safety deposit box. Yes, I said, intense and urgent. You did not sign the land over to him, did you? Even with the drugs, even with the fear. You kept that secret. She nodded slowly, a child confessing a sin. He asked. He hit me and asked. I told him I lost the papers. I told him I did not know. I kept it safe, Daddy. I kept the dirt safe. I pulled her into my arms. She was stiff and cold, smelling of sickness, but she was my daughter. She had held on. Despite the torture, despite the drugs, despite the psychological warfare, she had held on to the one thing that mattered. She had protected the asset not because of its value, but because it was the one secret she shared with me. You did good. Sarah, I whispered into her hair. You did so good. Now listen to me. This is a mission. Do you remember when we played soldier? She nodded against my chest. Yes. You are under deep cover now. You are a sleeper agent. You have to pretend. You have to take their medicine, but you do not swallow it, if you can help it. You have to sign their papers, but you know they are fake. You have to hold on for 3 more days. Can you do that? 3 days, she asked, her voice trembling. 3 days. Then the cavalry arrives. I felt her relax slightly, the tension in her wire-thin frame easing. She believed me. Or maybe she just wanted to believe in a savior. I laid her back down on the mattress. I pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. I wanted to take her right then. I wanted to carry her out of this hellhole and run. But we would not get 10 miles. Blake would report a kidnapping. He had the legal guardianship. The police would stop us. They would return her to him and throw me in jail. And then he would kill her. He would overdose her and call it an accident. No. I had to play the game. I had to destroy his legal hold on her before I could remove her physically. I stood up. I took my phone out and snapped photos of the ledger. I took photos of the bucket. I took close-up photos of the needle tracks on her arms. Evidence. Cold, hard data. I looked at her one last time. She was watching me, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Sleep, soldier," I said. "I have the watch." I turned and walked back to the stairs. The climb up felt heavier than the descent. I was carrying the weight of her pain now, but it was a good weight. It was fuel. I locked the basement door behind me. I crept back through the silent kitchen. I bypassed the cameras. I shimmied the lock on my bedroom door and slipped inside. I stood in the center of the dark room, my chest heaving. I went to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was Leonard Katz. Somewhere out there were the laws that governed this country. Blake Anderson thought he could use those laws as a shield. He thought a piece of paper gave him the right to own a human being. He did not know who he was dealing with. He was a businessman. He dealt in profit and loss. I was a builder. I dealt in stress points and structural failure. I looked at the photos on my phone. The bruises. The ledger. "I am going to bankrupt you, Blake," I whispered to the glass. "I am going to take your money. I am going to take your reputation. And then, when you are standing in the wreckage of your life wondering what happened, I am going to hand you a bill for every single tear my daughter shed." The sun would be up in 3 hours. I needed to shower. I needed to shave. I needed to put on my suit and my mask of the defeated old man. The war had officially begun, and the first casualty would be Blake Anderson's arrogance. The next morning, I walked out of the Anderson estate with my head bowed low. I told the security guard at the gate that I was going to the local Veterans Affairs office to see if I could get an advance on my pension for a plane ticket back to the desert. It was a lie, of course. A lie designed to make me look pathetic and desperate. Blake watched me go from the balcony, his coffee cup in hand, looking like a feudal lord surveying a peasant. He let me leave because he believed I was defeated. He believed the night in the surveillance room had broken my spirit. He did not know that I was not retreating. I was flanking. I walked 3 blocks in the drizzling rain until I was out of sight of the cameras. Then I hailed a cab. I did not go to the VA. I went to a diner on the outskirts of the industrial district, a place called Sal's where the coffee tasted like battery acid and the windows were yellowed with grease. It was the kind of place where men went to disappear. It was also the only place Leonard Katz agreed to meet. Leonard was sitting in the back booth. He was 68 years old, but he looked like a man who had lived 3 lifetimes. He wore a rumpled trench coat and a fedora that had seen better decades. To the untrained eye, he looked like a retired accountant waiting for a bus. But I knew better. Leonard Katz was a shark who had swum in the deepest, bloodiest waters of Wall Street for 40 years. He had retired only because he got tired of winning. I slid into the booth opposite him. He did not smile. He simply pushed a mug of black coffee toward me. "You look like hell," Rex Leonard said, his voice like gravel grinding in a mixer. "I feel like hell," I replied, taking a sip. The hot, bitter liquid burned my throat, grounding me. "You got the file?" Leonard reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it on the formica table between us. He tapped it with a nicotine-stained finger. "I did some digging last night after you called," Leonard said. "And Rex, it is worse than we thought. Your son-in-law is not just an abuser. He is a financial illusionist, a magician whose only trick is making money disappear." "Tell me," I said, leaning in. Leonard opened the file. It was filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and corporate filings. He pointed to a complex diagram of shell companies. "Blake Anderson is running a classic Ponzi scheme," Leonard explained. "He calls it the Anderson High Yield Property Fund. He takes money from new investors, promising them 20% returns on real estate developments that do not exist. He uses that money to pay off the old investors and fund his lavish lifestyle. The cars, the suits, the parties. It is all bought with stolen money." I looked at the numbers. Millions of dollars flowing in and out. It was a house of cards built in a hurricane. But here is the problem. Leonard continued, his face grim. The stream of new investors is drying up. The market is cooling. People are asking for their money back. Blake is bleeding cash, Rex. He is desperate. He needs a massive injection of capital within the week, or the whole thing collapses, and he goes to federal prison for 20 years. That is why he is selling the house, I realized. The puzzle pieces snapping into place. "Exactly," Leonard said. "The Queen Anne estate is the last real asset he controls, or thinks he controls. He has a buyer lined up, a conglomerate called Apex Holdings. They offered him $4 million in cash. He needs that money to plug the hole in his fund before the auditors come next Monday." I clenched my fist under the table. "He is selling my daughter's home to save his own skin." Leonard nodded. "He thinks he can. He has Sarah's power of attorney. He has her signature on the deed transfer. Legally, on the surface, he looks bulletproof. If he sells that house, he disappears. He takes the money, takes Sarah, and vanishes to a country with no extradition treaty. And you never see her again." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. That was his plan. The sale was his escape hatch. "We have to stop the sale," I said. "No," Leonard said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "We do not stop the sale. We encourage it. In fact, we accelerate it." I looked at him confused. "What are you talking about?" Leonard pulled another document from the bottom of the stack. It was an old document, yellowed with age. It bore my signature and a notary stamp from 6 years ago. "Do you remember this, Rex?" Leonard asked softly. I looked at the title. "The Sarah Dalton Irrevocable Land Trust." "I remember," I said. "I set it up before I left. I wanted to make sure the land stayed in the family, no matter what happened to the house." Leonard tapped the paper. "This is the nuclear option. In the state of Washington, property law allows for a severance of the estate. It means the structure, the house itself, and the land it sits on can be owned by two different entities. When you bought the property, you bought the land. When you built the house, you kept the titles separate. You transferred the house deed to Sarah 5 years ago. But the land deed—" He paused for effect, his eyes twinkling with malice. "The land deed is held by this trust," Leonard whispered. "And the trust has a very specific clause. It grants surface rights to the owner of the house only as long as the owner is a blood descendant of the Dalton line. If the house is sold to a third party, the surface rights expire immediately." I stared at him, my mind racing to catch up with his legal genius. "Wait," I said. "So if Blake sells the house to this Apex Holdings, then Apex Holdings buys a pile of bricks sitting on land they do not own," Leonard finished. "And since they do not own the land and the surface rights expire upon sale, they would be trespassing. The trust would have the legal right to demand the immediate removal of the structure." I started to laugh. It was a dark, humorless laugh, but it felt good. "You mean they would have to move the house? Or tear it down," Leonard said. "Or pay the trust whatever rent we demand?" which makes the house effectively worthless to any buyer who does update their due diligence. But Blake does not know this, I said. Leonard shook his head. He was too arrogant to check the original survey records. He saw the house deed and assumed it covered the dirt. He is about to sell a car without an engine. So what is the play, Leonard? The play is we become the buyer, Leonard said. I contacted my friends at the Olympus Fund. It is a shell company I use for aggressive acquisitions. We approach Blake today. We offer him $5 million, cash, $1 million more than Apex, but we demand a quick close. 48 hours, no inspection, no due diligence period, just a straight cash for keys deal. He will take it, I said. He is greedy and he is desperate. He will take the higher offer. He will. Leonard agreed, and he will sign a contract that includes a warranty of title clause. It means he guarantees he is selling us a usable property. When we reveal that he sold us a house on land he does not own, he will be in breach of contract. But not just civil breach. Because he accepted wire fraud money across state lines, it becomes federal fraud. We trap him, I said. We bury him, Leonard corrected. We buy the debt. We buy the house. And then we reveal the trust. He will owe us the $5 million back plus damages plus the fraud charges. He will be bankrupt instantly. And the best part, since he acted in bad faith, the power of attorney he holds over Sarah becomes voidable. We can petition for emergency guardianship immediately. It was perfect. It was a surgical strike. It used his own greed and haste against him. But there is one problem, Leonard said, his expression darkening. Sarah. She has to be there. She has to sign the final closing documents as the nominal owner. If she is too drugged or too unstable, the notary might refuse. Or worse, if she says something that tips him off that she knows about the trust. She knows, I said. I told her last night. I told her to hold on, to play the sleeper agent. Leonard looked at me, assessing my confidence. Can she do it, Rex? She has been psychologically tortured for years. Can she stand in a room with him and pretend to sign her life away without cracking? I thought of the needle marks on her arms. I thought of the fear in her eyes. But I also thought of the way she held the secret of the land for 6 years. She was a Dalton. We do not break. We just wait for the right moment to explode. She can do it, I said firmly. She is my daughter. Leonard nodded and closed the file. Then let us go hunting. I will make the call to Blake. You go back to the house. Play the part. Be the defeated father. Ask to say goodbye. Keep him distracted while I bait the hook. I stood up. I felt lighter than I had in years. The rain outside didn't look gloomy anymore. It looked like a cleansing flood. One more thing, Leonard said as I turned to leave. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small clear vial. What is this? I asked. Celine, Leonard said. I have a contact at the pharmacy Blake uses. If you can swap this with her next dose, she will be lucid for the signing. But you have to be careful, Rex. If he catches you... He won't catch me, I said, pocketing the vial. He is too busy looking at his bank account. I walked out of the diner and back into the gray Seattle morning. I was not just a father anymore. I was an operative. I was the inside man in the greatest heist of my life. I was going to steal my daughter back right from under the nose of the devil. And he was going to thank me for it right up until the moment the handcuffs clicked. I hailed another cab. Destination, the Anderson estate, or as I now called it, Ground Zero. The ride back was silent, but my mind was loud with calculations. I had the weapon. I had the plan. Now I just needed the courage to execute it. As the taxi wound up the hill, I saw the house looming in the distance. It looked strong, imposing. But I knew the truth. It was sitting on borrowed land, and the landlord was coming to collect. I spent the next 2 hours in a business center at the public library, turning myself into a ghost. In the world of high finance, identity is just a collection of numbers, and I had the right numbers. I logged into my secured server in Zurich. The account had been dormant for 6 years, accumulating interest and dust. I woke it up. With a few keystrokes, I moved $6 million into a shell company registered in Delaware. I named it the Olympus Distressed Asset Fund. It sounded impressive. It sounded like the kind of faceless corporate predator that eats small companies for breakfast. That was exactly what Blake Anderson admired. He did not respect justice, but he respected power. I printed the incorporation papers. I forged the digital signatures of a fictional board of directors. By noon, I had created a monster. By 1 o'clock, Leonard Katz was ready to take it for a walk. I sat in a rental car parked across the street from Blake's office building. It was a glass tower that screamed pretension. I wore an earpiece connected to the bug Leonard had slipped into his lapel pocket. I was the audience for a play I had written. Leonard walked into the lobby. He had shed the trench coat. He was wearing a charcoal Armani suit that cost more than Blake's car. He looked every inch the shark he was. He breezed past security, flashing a card that meant nothing but looked like everything. I heard the elevator ding through the earpiece, then the receptionist's voice. "Can I help you, sir?" "Mr. Katz, to see Mr. Anderson," Leonard said. His voice was no longer gravel. It was silk wrapped around steel. "I do not have an appointment. Tell him I am here from Olympus. Tell him we know about the audit committee meeting next Monday." There was a pause, the sound of typing, then a hurried whisper. "Please go right in, Mr. Katz." I closed my eyes and visualized the scene. Blake sitting behind his oversized desk, trying to look busy while his world burned down around him. The door opened. "Mr. Anderson," Leonard said, "I will not waste your time. I know you are a busy man, mostly busy trying to figure out how to fill a $4 million hole in your balance sheet before the feds show up. So, who are you?" Blake demanded. His voice was high-tight. Panic was setting in. "I am the solution," Leonard replied. "I represent the Olympus Fund. We specialize in acquiring distressed assets from distressed gentlemen. We have been watching your portfolio. We like the house. We like the land. We do not like the management." "Get out," Blake snapped. "My company is fine. The house is not for sale." "Everything is for sale," Leonard countered, "especially when the owner is facing 20 years for wire fraud." "Do not insult my intelligence, Blake. We have seen your books. You are leveraging new investor capital to pay dividends. It is a classic Ponzi. And the music is about to stop." Silence. I could hear Blake's breathing through the earpiece. It was heavy, ragged. He knew he was caught. "What do you want?" Blake asked finally, his voice dropping to a defeatist whisper. "We want the Queen Anne estate," Leonard said. "And we want the intellectual property rights to your development firm. We are willing to pay $5 million, cash." I heard the squeak of a leather chair. Blake had jumped up. $5 million. That is above market value." Leonard chuckled. A cold, dry sound. "We are paying for speed, Mr. Anderson. We need a tax write-off for this quarter. We need to close in 48 hours. No inspection, no due diligence. We take the property as is. You walk away with $5 million clean. You pay off your investors. You avoid prison. You start over in the Caymans or wherever rats like you go to hide." I gripped the steering wheel. This was the hook. The greed. Blake was doing the math in his head. $5 million would cover his debts and leave him with $1 million to run. "What is the catch?" Blake asked. "No catch," Leonard said. "Just conditions. First, we close on Friday morning. Second, the house must be vacated immediately upon signing. Third, your wife, Sarah. She is the deed holder on record. She must be present to sign. And she must be lucid. My legal team does not deal with contested signatures. If she looks drugged, if she hesitates, the deal is off, and I call the SEC on my way out." There was a long pause. I held my breath. This was the pivot point. If he refused to bring Sarah, we were dead. "She is not well," Blake said slowly. She has episodes. Fix her, Leonard said brutally. You have 2 days. Clean her up, put her in a nice dress, make sure she smiles and signs her name. After that, she is not your problem anymore. You can leave her here. We will handle the eviction. Leave her, Blake repeated. You are selling the house, Leonard said. Do you really want to drag a mental patient with you to your new life? I heard the sound of liquid being poured. Blake was drinking. He was weighing his humanity against his freedom. It was not a long contest, Fine Blake said. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. But I want the money wire transferred to an offshore account. Standard procedure, Leonard agreed. Do we have a deal? I heard the slap of a hand hitting a hand. The deal with the devil was signed. See you Friday, Blake Leonard said. Do not disappoint me. My employers get very nasty when they are disappointed. I heard the door close. I heard the elevator ding. I let out a breath I had been holding for 10 minutes. The trap was set. The rat had taken the cheese. I watched Leonard walk out of the building. He did not look at me. He just tapped his ear once and walked away. I started the car. Now came the hard part. Blake would be going home with a new mission. He would be desperate to get Sarah ready. He would stop the heavy sedatives because he needed her awake. But he would threaten her. He would terrorize her into compliance. I had to get back to the house. I had to intercept the transition. I had to be there when he told her she was being sold. I drove back to the estate. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. I parked the rental car 3 streets away and walked back up the hill. I let myself in through the side gate using the code I had disabled the night before. I entered the house through the kitchen. It was empty. I moved to the living room. I sat in the armchair in the corner and waited. Half an hour later, Blake burst through the front door. He was manic. His face was flushed with the high of the deal. He threw his briefcase onto the sofa. "Monica," he shouted. "Monica, get down here!" Monica appeared at the top of the stairs, looking bored. "What is it, Blake? Did the audit notice come?" "Better," Blake yelled. "I sold it. I sold the whole damn thing. 5 million. Cash. We are rich, Monica. We are free." Monica ran down the stairs, her eyes wide. Who bought it?" "Some investment fund," Blake said, pouring himself a drink. "Doesn't matter. They want a quick close." "Friday. We have to pack. We are leaving for Saint-Tropez on Saturday." "What about the old man?" Monica asked, looking around. "Screw him," Blake laughed. "He can rot in a nursing home. And Sarah..." He paused, taking a long swallow of whiskey. "We have to get her ready," Blake said. "They need her to sign. Stop the injections. Give her stimulants. Caffeine. B12. Whatever it takes. She needs to look like a functioning human being for 1 hour." "And after that?" Monica asked. "After that, we leave her," Blake said. "The new owners can deal with the crazy bitch." I sat in the shadows listening to them plan the disposal of my daughter like she was a piece of broken furniture. My hand drifted to the pocket where I kept the vial of saline. I stood up. "That sounds like a wonderful plan, Blake," I said, stepping into the light. Blake jumped, spilling his drink. "Jesus, Rex, how long have you been sitting there?" "Long enough," I said, keeping my face impassive. "I heard you are selling." "Congratulations." Blake straightened his jacket, recovering his composure. "Yes, well, it is a business decision. Best for everyone. Sarah needs professional care that I can no longer provide. The proceeds from the sale will go toward securing her future." "Liar." "I understand," I said. "It must be a relief." "It is," Blake said. "Look, Rex, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but this is happening. Friday morning we sign. You should probably pack your things too." "I will be ready," I said. Blake nodded and turned to Monica. Go get Sarah. Clean her up. We start the detox protocol now. Monica went to the basement door. I watched her unlock it. I will help, I said, moving forward. She is my daughter. She trusts me. If you want her to behave, let me talk to her. Blake looked at me suspiciously. Then he shrugged. Fine. But no funny business. If she acts up on Friday, the deal dies. And if the deal dies, I swear to God, Rex, I will put her in a state facility so dark, you will never find her. I understand, I said. I want this deal to go through as much as you do. And I meant it. I wanted him to sign that contract. I wanted him to sign his own death warrant. I followed Monica down the stairs. Sarah was sitting on the mattress, hugging her knees. She looked up and saw me. Fear flashed in her eyes, then confusion. Daddy, she whispered. Mr. Anderson has good news, Sarah, I said, my voice cheerful and loud for the benefit of the microphones. We are going to have a big day on Friday. You need to get strong. Monica tossed a dress onto the bed. It was a pale blue summer dress, the one Sarah had worn on her honeymoon. Put this on, Monica ordered, and take a shower. You smell like a kennel. I stood between Monica and Sarah. I will help her up the stairs, Monica. You go start the coffee. Monica rolled her eyes and stomped back up the stairs. I turned to Sarah. I knelt down and gripped her hands. This is it, I whispered. The game is on. He is stopping the drugs. He needs you lucid. Sarah trembled. He is selling the house. Yes, I said. And we are going to let him. But the trust, Sarah whispered. The land. I put a finger to her lips. Exactly. When he signs that paper, he is committing fraud. He is walking into a trap we dug for him. But you have to be brave. You have to walk into that room on Friday and sign your name. Can you do that? Sarah looked at the dress. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were still glassy, but deep down I saw a flicker of the fire that used to burn there. I will sign, she said. I will sign his end. Good girl, I said. We spent the next 2 days in a strange purgatory. Blake was manic, bouncing between packing boxes and shredding documents. Monica was cold and efficient, stripping the house of valuables. I played the role of the submissive grandfather, making tea, helping with the boxes, keeping my head down. But every time I poured Sarah a glass of water, I slipped in the saline solution Leonard gave me, flushing the toxins from her system. Every time Blake wasn't looking, I whispered courage into her ear. By Thursday night, Sarah was changing. The tremors in her hands were lessening. Her speech was less slurred. She was waking up from a 3-year nightmare. And with the wakefulness came the pain. She remembered everything. Every blow. Every insult. Every night in the basement. I sat with her in the guest room, which Blake had graciously allowed her to use for her final nights. I want to kill him, Dad, she whispered, her voice steady for the first time. I want to push him down the stairs. No, I said. That is too easy. Death is a release. Prison is a punishment. We want him to live a long life, knowing he had it all and lost it because he was stupid. She nodded. She trusted me. Friday morning dawned bright and cold. The sky was the color of steel. The house was spotless. The boxes were stacked by the door, ready for the movers. Blake was wearing his lucky suit. He looked at himself in the mirror, adjusting his tie. Showtime, he said to his reflection. He turned to me. Rex, bring her down. And remember, one wrong move and I bury her. I went upstairs. Sarah was standing by the window wearing the blue dress. She had put on a little makeup covering the bruises on her cheek. She looked beautiful. She looked fragile. But she stood straight. Ready? I asked. She took a deep breath. Ready. We walked down the stairs together. Blake was waiting at the bottom. He looked at Sarah with a critical eye. "Not bad," he said. "Just keep your mouth shut and sign where I tell you. Smile at the nice man. Do not speak unless spoken to." "Yes," Sarah said. Her voice was soft, but it did not waver. The doorbell rang. It echoed through the empty house like a gong. Blake checked his watch. 10 o'clock exactly. Punctual. I like that. He walked to the door and threw it open. Leonard Katz stood there. He was not alone. Behind him were 2 other men in suits carrying briefcases. Witnesses. And behind them, parked on the street, was a black town car. "Mr. Anderson," Leonard said, stepping inside. "Shall we conclude our business?" "Please," Blake said, gesturing to the dining room table which had been cleared for the occasion. "Come in." I walked behind Sarah, my hand hovering near her back. This was the moment. The trap was sprung. All Blake had to do was step on the trigger. We sat at the table. Leonard sat opposite Blake. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "The purchase agreement," Leonard said, sliding it across the table. "The transfer of deed, the warranty of title, and the wire transfer confirmation. $5 million pending signatures." Blake's eyes widened when he saw the transfer document. He licked his lips. "Let us get this done," Blake said, picking up a pen. He signed his name with a flourish. Fast. Aggressive. He did not read a single line. He just wanted the money. "Now you, Sarah," Blake said, shoving the papers toward her. "Sign here, here, and here." Sarah picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the paper. The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking. I could hear Blake's heart beating. "Sign it," Blake hissed. Sarah looked up. She looked at Blake. Then she looked at Leonard. And finally, she looked at me. I nodded. She lowered the pen and wrote her name. Sarah Dalton Anderson. "It is done," Blake said, exhaling. "It is finally done." He reached for the wire transfer confirmation. "Not so fast," Leonard said. His hand clamped down on the paper. Blake looked up, confused. "What?" "We signed. Release the funds." Leonard smiled, and in that smile, Blake finally saw the shark. "We have a problem, Mr. Anderson," Leonard said. "You just sold me a house, but you forgot to sell me the land it sits on." Blake laughed nervously. "What kind of joke is this? The land comes with the house. It is standard." "Not in this case," Leonard said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the old yellowed document. The trust. Rex pulled his chair back and stood up. "I believe I can explain," I said, my voice filling the room. Blake spun around, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at me. Then he looked at Sarah. And for the first time he saw that she was not looking at the floor. She was looking at him. And she was smiling. It was a cold, terrible smile. "Hello, Blake," Sarah said. "Welcome to the eviction." The night before the signing, Blake threw a party. He called it a farewell gathering, but anyone with eyes could see it for what it was. It was a victory lap. He had invited 30 of his closest sycophants to drink his scotch and laugh at his jokes while he stood on the precipice of what he thought that was his greatest triumph. The house was filled with the discordant noise of jazz music and the clinking of expensive crystal. I sat in my room listening to the bass thumping through the floorboards. To Blake, I was the defeated father packing his bags in shame. To the guests, I was invisible. But tonight, invisibility was my greatest weapon. I checked my watch. It was 9 o'clock. The party was in full swing. The caterers were rushing back and forth from the kitchen to the living room, carrying trays of crab cakes and caviar. This was my window. I stripped off my flannel shirt and put on a crisp white button-down and a black vest I had filched from the laundry pile in the mudroom earlier that day. I slicked my hair back. I picked up a silver tray I had hidden under my bed. In the chaos of a catered event, nobody looks at the face of the help. They only look at the tray. I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. The air was thick with the smell of roasted meat and heavy perfume. I moved with the fluid efficiency of a man who has walked through minefields. I descended the back stairs, avoiding the main foyer where Blake was holding court. My target was not the party. My target was the study. Blake's sanctuary. The place where he kept his secrets and his poisons. I reached the ground floor and merged into the stream of waiters. I walked right past Monica. She was wearing a red dress that cost more than my first truck, laughing at something a man in a gray suit was saying. She looked right at me and saw nothing. I was just a uniform, a prop in her stage play of wealth. I turned the corner and slipped into the dark corridor that led to the study. The door was locked. A heavy keypad lock, digital, expensive. But Blake was arrogant. He relied on technology without understanding human nature. I had watched him punch in the code 2 days ago. He did not shield the pad. 13579. Odd numbers. A straight line down the keypad. The combination of a lazy man. I punched in the code. The light turned green. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me, locking it instantly. The noise of the party faded to a dull murmur. The room smelled of leather and stale cigar smoke. I did not turn on the light. I pulled a small pen light from my pocket and clamped it between my teeth. Step 1. The eyes. I located the camera in the corner. It was a wireless model blinking a slow red rhythm. I dragged a heavy oak chair over to the corner and climbed up. I did not cut the wire. Cutting the wire triggers a loss of signal alarm. Instead, I pulled a small loop of black electrical tape from my pocket and pasted it over the lens. Simple, crude, effective. To the security system, the camera was still working. It was just seeing pitch blackness. I climbed down and moved to the desk. It was a chaotic mess of papers. I ignored them. I was looking for the wall safe. I knew it was here. Every crook has a safe where he keeps the things he cannot trust to a bank. I scanned the walls. An oil painting of a ship in a storm hung behind the desk. Too cliché. I moved the painting. Nothing. I checked the bookshelf. I ran my fingers along the spines of the books. Fake leather. Unread. Then I felt a draft coming from behind a row of encyclopedias on the bottom shelf. I pulled the books away. There it was. A sentry safe, fireproof, drill-resistant. I pressed my ear against the cold steel door. This was old school. No digital pad here, just a mechanical dial. Left, right, left. I began to turn the dial, slowly feeling for the friction points where the tumblers caught. Click. I held my breath. The music outside swelled, a saxophone wailing in the distance. Click. My fingers were sweating, but my hands were steady. I was not a safecracker by trade, but I was an engineer. I understood how gears worked. I understood the language of metal on metal. Click, thunk. The handle turned. The heavy door swung open on silent hinges. I shone my light inside. It was a treasure trove of corruption. Stacks of cash banded in tens. Passports, 3 of them, all with Blake's face but different names. One for Brazil, one for Panama, one for Vietnam. He was not just planning to move to Saint-Tropez. He was planning to vanish from the face of the earth. I took out my phone and began photographing everything. The passports, the cash, and the black ledger at the bottom of the stack. I opened the ledger. It was a handwritten list of bribes, payments to building inspectors, payments to auditors, payments to a doctor named Dr. Aris. I paused. Dr. Aris. That was the man who signed Sarah's competency evaluation. Here it was in black and white. $5,000 a month for consulting services. This was the smoking gun. This was the bullet that would put Blake away, not just for fraud, but for conspiracy. But I was not done. I needed the weapon. I searched the back of the safe. There was a small metal box. I opened it. Inside were 6 vials of clear liquid and a syringe kit. The label on the vials read haloperidol, high dose, antipsychotic, a chemical restraint used for violent patients. This was what he was using to turn my brilliant daughter into a zombie. My hand shook with a sudden violent rage. I wanted to smash the vials. I wanted to run upstairs and plunge the needle into Blake's neck. I wanted him to feel the fog, the helplessness, the terror he had inflicted on Sarah. But I forced myself to breathe. Revenge is a discipline. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the identical vials Leonard had given me. Saline solution, salt water, harmless. I took the real drugs out and placed them in my pocket. I put the saline vials in the metal box. I closed the box and put it back exactly where I found it. Tomorrow morning, when he wanted to sedate her for the signing, he would be giving her a shot of hydration. He would think she was under his control, but she would be wide awake. I was about to close the safe when the doorknob rattled. I froze. I killed the penlight. The handle turned, locked. "Who locked this?" I heard Blake's voice muffled through the wood. I scrambled away from the safe. I left the door open. There was no time to close it and spin the dial. I dove behind the heavy velvet curtains that covered the bay window. I pressed myself flat against the glass, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The keypad beeped. 13579. The door opened. Light flooded the room from the hallway, then vanished as the door closed. The overhead light flicked on. I peeked through a slit in the curtains. Blake walked in. He was holding a glass of whiskey. He was not alone. Another man was with him. Short, bald, nervous-looking. "I am telling you, Gary, it is a done deal," Blake said, walking to the desk. He did not look at the safe. The open door was hidden by the high back of his leather chair. "But the audit," Gary said. "If they look at the construction loans—" "They won't look," Blake laughed, sitting down. He spun the chair around. My heart stopped. If he turned 2 inches to the left, he would see the open safe. "They are buying the assets," Gary Blake continued, kicking his feet up on the desk. "They do not care about the loans. They just want the land. And once the wire hits my account, I am gone. You should do the same." "Where will you go?" Gary asked, pacing the room. He walked toward the window. Toward me. I stopped breathing. I could smell Gary's sweat. He stopped 3 feet from the curtain. He looked out at the rain. "Somewhere warm," Blake said. "Somewhere with no extradition." Gary turned back. "What about the wife?" Blake snorted. "Sarah. She is the luggage I am leaving at the airport. Once she signs that paper, she is a ward of the state. Or maybe I will just leave the back door open and let nature take its course. She wanders, you know. It is a tragedy waiting to happen." The cruelty of his words was physically painful. It took every ounce of my willpower not to burst through the curtains and strangle him. But I needed the recording. I had my phone running in my pocket, capturing every word. This was not just fraud anymore. This was conspiracy to commit murder. "Finish your drink," Blake said, standing up. "We have to get back. Monica is getting suspicious." He walked to the door. "Come on, Gary. Stop worrying. We won." Gary sighed and followed him. The light flicked off. The door closed. The lock engaged. I waited 5 full minutes. I needed to be sure. My legs were cramping. My shirt was soaked with cold sweat. Finally, I stepped out from the curtains. I walked to the safe. I closed the heavy door. I spun the dial. Locked. I climbed up on the chair and peeled the tape off the camera lens. I put the chair back. I checked the room. No footprints. No sign I had been there. I was a ghost again. I slipped out of the study and back into the hallway. The party was winding down. Guests were retrieving their coats. I merged with the staff clearing the empty glasses. I walked right past Blake one last time. He was shaking hands, his face flushed with triumph. "Good night, sir," I murmured as I passed him. He did not even look at me. He just nodded at the air. I walked up the back stairs to my room. I locked the door. I took the vials of haloperidol out of my pocket and set them on the nightstand. They glittered in the moonlight. Evidence. I took out my phone and played back the recording. It is a tragedy waiting to happen. "You are right, Blake," I whispered to the empty room. "A tragedy is coming. But not for Sarah." I stripped off the waiter's vest. I washed my face in the cold water of the bathroom sink. I looked at myself in the mirror. The old man was gone. The soldier was back. I went to the window and looked down at the street. The town car was gone. The guests were leaving. The house was going quiet. I lay down on the bed, but I did not close my eyes. I visualized the morning, the table, the pen, the look on Blake's face when the trap snapped shut. I had the money. I had the drugs. I had the confession. Tomorrow was not a business transaction. Tomorrow was an execution. And I was the hangman. The morning of the signing did not begin with sunlight. It began with the absence of the fog. For 3 years, Sarah had woken up wrapped in a heavy gray blanket of chemical suppression. Her thoughts had been slow, viscous things that slipped through her fingers before she could grasp them. But today was different. Today she woke up and the world was sharp. The first thing she felt was pain. The bruise on her hip where she had fallen against the bucket throbbed with a dull red heat. The stiffness in her joints from sleeping on a damp mattress screamed at her. But to Sarah, this pain was a gift. It was vivid. It was real. It was the first honest thing she had felt since Blake started his treatments. She sat up in the bed. Her head did not spin. The room did not tilt. The dust motes dancing in the shaft of gray light from the window were clear and distinct. She looked at her hands. For months they had looked like foreign objects, distant and unconnected to her will. Now she flexed her fingers. She saw the dirt under her nails. She saw the tremors were gone. She clenched her fist. It was a weak fist, but it was hers. The door opened. It was not the heavy, aggressive entry of Blake or the clicking, impatient heels of Monica. It was a quiet, controlled movement. Rex slipped inside and locked the door behind him. He was not wearing the flannel shirt and cardigan of the defeated grandfather. He was wearing a dark suit. It was old and the style was dated, but it was pressed to a razor edge. He looked like a man going to a funeral or a war. He carried a tray. On it was a steaming mug of black coffee and a single piece of toast. No needles. No little plastic cups of pills. "Drink," he said. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. Sarah took the mug. Her hands were steady. The smell of the coffee was overwhelming, rich and bitter and alive. She took a sip. The caffeine hit her system like a jump start. Her eyes widened. "The fog is gone," she whispered. Her voice was raspy from disuse, but the words were clear. Rex nodded. He moved to the window and checked the driveway below. "I flushed the system," he said without turning around. The saline worked. "You are back in the driver's seat, Sarah, but you have to stay buckled in. The road is about to get very rough." Sarah looked at the back of this man, this stranger who wore her father's face. When he had arrived 2 days ago, she had seen a ghost, a relic from a past she thought she had hallucinated. But now with the drugs gone, she saw him clearly. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his weight rested on the balls of his feet ready to spring. This was not the gentle architect who taught her how to draw perspective. This was the man who built airfields in combat zones. This was the Rexford Dalton the world feared. He turned to face her. He walked over and knelt by the bed so they were eye to eye. He took her hands in his. His palms were rough, calloused like sandpaper. "Listen to me, Sarah," he said. His eyes were blue steel, intense and terrifyingly focused. "In an hour, you are going to walk downstairs. Blake will be there. Monica will be there. They will expect the zombie. They will expect the broken doll who signs whatever they put in front of her." "I am scared," Sarah admitted. The fear was a cold stone in her stomach. "Blake hurts me, Dad. He knows how to hurt me where it doesn't show." "He cannot hurt you today," Rex said. "Because today you are not his wife. You are my asset, and nobody touches my assets." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver object. It was a pen, a heavy, expensive fountain pen. "This is your weapon," Rex said, pressing it into her palm. "When you sign that paper, you are not surrendering. You are detonating the charge. Do you understand?" Sarah looked at the pen. It felt cold and heavy. She closed her fingers around it. "I understand," she said. "Good," Rex said, standing up. He checked his watch. "Now get dressed. The blue dress. Fix your hair. Put on the mask. When you walk out that door, you are Sarah Anderson, the obedient wife. But inside you are Sarah Dalton, and Daltons do not break. We build, and sometimes we demolish." He turned to leave, but Sarah grabbed his wrist. "Dad," she said. He stopped. "Thank you." He did not smile. He just nodded once, a sharp military acknowledgement. Then he unlocked the door and slipped out, leaving her alone with the silence and the growing fire in her blood. Sarah moved to the mirror. She stripped off the nightgown. She looked at her body, the ribs showing through the skin, the bruises, the scars. She traced the line of a scar on her shoulder where Monica had thrown a vase. She put on the blue dress. It hung loose on her frame, but she cinched the belt tight. She brushed her hair. She found a tube of lipstick in the drawer and applied it. Red. The color of war. She stared at her reflection. The eyes that stared back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a survivor. She heard the sound of a car engine outside. She went to the window. Down below in the rain, a black town car had pulled up. A man got out. It was Leonard Katz. He looked up at the house like a vulture eyeing a carcass. Behind him, another car pulled up. A sleek sports car. Blake's car. He was out there talking to the driver. He was laughing. He looked up at her window and waved mockingly. Sarah did not wave back. She stepped away from the window. She walked to the door. She placed her hand on the knob. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm, but her mind was ice cold. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet, the calm before the collapse. She walked to the top of the stairs. She looked down. Rex was waiting at the bottom. He looked up at her. He did not say a word. He just adjusted his tie. A tiny, subtle movement. It was a signal. Ready. Sarah took the first step down, then the second. With each step, the floorboards creaked under her feet, announcing her arrival. She was not walking to her execution. She was walking to her emancipation, and the pen in her pocket felt heavier than a gun. The dining room had been transformed into a theater of corporate execution. The long mahogany table was cleared of the breakfast dishes and the vase of dying lilies. In their place sat 3 neat stacks of legal documents. They looked harmless enough. Just paper. Just ink. But I knew better. These papers were the coordinates for an airstrike that was about to level Blake Anderson's life. I stood by the fireplace, my back to the cold hearth. I had assumed the position of the defeated patriarch. My shoulders were slumped. My hands were clasped behind my back. To anyone watching, I was just an old man witnessing the dismantling of his family legacy. but my eyes were scanning every micro-expression in the room. Leonard Katz sat at the center of the table. He was a statue carved from granite. He did not look at the view of the Space Needle outside the window. He did not look at the expensive art on the walls. He looked only at the documents. His two associates sat flanking him like silent sentinels. They opened their briefcases in unison, the click of the latches sounding like the cocking of pistols. Blake paced the room. He was vibrating with a frantic energy. He checked his watch every 30 seconds. He smoothed his tie. He adjusted his cufflinks. He looked like a man who had just injected a stimulant directly into his heart. Maybe he had. Greed is the most potent drug on earth, and Blake was high on it. "Where is the wire?" he demanded, stopping behind his chair. "I want to see the confirmation before I pick up a pen." Leonard did not look up. He simply slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood. "The funds are in escrow, Mr. Anderson," Leonard said, his voice devoid of emotion. $5 million. The moment the notary stamps the deed, the money moves to your offshore account in the Caymans. Blake snatched the paper up. He devoured the numbers with his eyes. A smile broke across his face. It was an ugly expression. It was the smile of a predator who thinks he has finally killed the big game. "Beautiful," Blake whispered. He looked at Monica, who was leaning against the doorframe, scrolling on her phone. "Did you hear that, babe? 5 million. We are out of here by noon." Monica looked up and smirked. "Just sign the damn papers, Blake. I have a spa appointment at 2. Blake laughed. He sat down at the head of the table. He picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen that Leonard had provided. He spun it in his fingers. "All right. Let us get this over with," Blake said. He looked at Sarah. She was sitting to his right. She was wearing the blue dress. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was sitting perfectly still. Too still. Blake did not notice the difference. He did not see that her spine was straight. He did not see that her eyes were clear. He only saw what he wanted to see. A broken object. A prop. Sarah, Blake said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Listen to me very carefully. These nice men are going to show you where to sign. You are going to write your name exactly as it appears on your driver's license. Do not shake. Do not cry. And for God's sake, do not start talking about the spiders in the walls. We do not want to scare the buyers, do we?" Sarah did not answer. She just looked at him. "Did you hear me?" Blake snapped, leaning in close to her face. "I heard you, Blake," Sarah said. Her voice was soft but steady. "Good," Blake said. He turned to the lawyers. "She is having a good day. We adjusted her medication. She understands what she is doing." Leonard nodded slowly. He pushed the first document toward Blake. "This is the sale agreement," Leonard said. "It outlines the transfer of the structure and all attached fixtures." Blake did not read a word. He flipped to the last page. He signed his name with a violent slash of ink. "Done," Blake said, flipping the document closed. "Next." "This is the warranty of title," Leonard said, sliding the second stack. "You are certifying that you have the legal right to sell the property and that there are no undisclosed encumbrances." "Undisclosed encumbrances?" Blake laughed. "Just the crazy wife and the old man. But they are leaving today, right, Rex?" He looked at me over his shoulder. I am leaving today, Blake," I said. My voice was flat. I promised myself I would not engage. I would not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. "Not yet." "Good," Blake said. He signed the second document. He was signing his life away, and he thought he was winning the lottery. It was pathetic. It was terrifying. "Now for the big one," Leonard said. He placed the deed in the center of the table. "This requires both signatures," Leonard explained. "Mr. Anderson as the holder of the power of attorney, and Mrs. Anderson as the primary title holder. Blake signed his line instantly. He pushed the paper towards Sarah. He shoved it so hard it slid off the placemat and hit her hand. "Sign it, Sarah," Blake ordered. Sarah picked up the pen I had given her. The silver barrel glinted in the gray light. She held it poised over the paper. She hesitated. Blake slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. "Do not freeze on me now, Sarah," Blake hissed. Everyone jumped except me and Leonard. "Look at her," Blake said, gesturing to the lawyers. "Look at how pathetic she is. This is why I have to sell. I cannot take care of an invalid anymore. She needs a facility, a place with padded walls and heavy locks. That is where she is going, you know. Once we have the money, I am putting her in the best institution money can buy. One where she can drool on herself without embarrassing me." I felt the blood boil in my veins. I clenched my fists behind my back so hard my fingernails cut into my palms. He was threatening her with an asylum right in front of the witnesses. He was digging his own grave with every word. Sarah looked up. She looked at Monica, who was checking her nails. She looked at Blake, who was red-faced with impatience. "You are sending me away?" Sarah asked quietly. "It is for your own good," Blake said, his voice fake and sweet. "You are sick, Sarah. You are broken. I am just trying to fix you. Now sign the paper so we can get you the help you need." He was gaslighting her until the very end. He was trying to make her believe that her imprisonment was an act of love. Sarah looked down at the paper. She looked at the signature line. Sarah Dalton Anderson. She took a deep breath. I saw her chest rise and fall. I saw the muscles in her jaw tighten. She was fighting the fear. She was fighting 3 years of conditioning that told her she was worthless. She lowered the pen. The nib touched the paper. She wrote. She did not scribble. She did not shake. She wrote her name in clear, elegant cursive, the handwriting of the architect she used to be. She finished the signature and set the pen down. "There," Blake said, exhaling a massive sigh of relief. He snatched the paper away from her before the ink was dry. Was that so hard? He handed the deed to Leonard. "There you go," Blake said, leaning back in his chair. He laced his fingers behind his head. "The house is yours. The keys are on the counter. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a plane to catch. Release the wire." He looked at me and winked. A slow, arrogant wink. "Goodbye, Rex," Blake said. "Do not let the door hit you on the way out." I stepped away from the fireplace. I walked toward the table. The floorboards creaked under my boots. Leonard did not move to release the wire. He did not pick up his phone. He sat looking at the deed. He adjusted his glasses. "Is there a problem?" Blake asked, his smile faltering slightly. "Why aren't you calling the bank?" Leonard looked up. His eyes were cold behind the lenses. "Mr. Anderson," Leonard said, "we have a slight complication." "Complication?" Blake said, sitting up straight. "What complication?" "The papers are signed. The title is clear." "The title to the house is clear," Leonard said. "But the title to the land is not." Blake laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "What are you talking about? The land comes with the house. It is real estate 101. Not when the land is held in a separate trust," Leonard said. Blake looked confused. He looked at Sarah. "Trust? What trust?" I pulled out the chair at the end of the table and sat down. I looked Blake dead in the eye. "The Sarah Dalton Irrevocable Land Trust," I said. The room went deadly silent. Blake looked at me. His face went pale. The arrogance drained out of him like water from a cracked glass. "You," I said, leaning forward. "You sold the house, Blake. Congratulations. But you did not sell the dirt under it." And I am afraid the landlord has a very strict policy about unauthorized structures on his property. Blake stood up. His chair fell backward with a crash. "What is this?" he screamed. "What is going on?" "This is the part where you find out you are not the smartest man in the room, Blake," I said. I looked at Sarah. She was smiling. It was a small smile, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Tell him, Sarah," I said. "Tell him who owns the ground he is standing on." Sarah stood up. She smoothed her dress. She looked at her husband. "I do," Sarah said. "My father gave it to me 6 years ago. And I never signed it over to you, Blake. Not even when you locked me in the basement. Not even when you drugged me. I kept the dirt." Blake looked from Sarah to me to Leonard. He saw the trap closing. He saw the walls coming in. "This is fraud," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Leonard. "You tricked me. This is entrapment." "No, Mr. Anderson," Leonard said, closing his file. "This is business. And you just sold a house you cannot legally keep on this property, which means you are in breach of contract." Leonard looked at his watch. "And since you accepted the wire transfer into a confirmed account, knowing you could not deliver clear title, you have also just committed federal wire fraud." Blake's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. I stood up and walked over to him. I was close enough to smell the fear sweat on him now. It smelled like victory. "You wanted to send her to an institution, Blake," I whispered. "I think you are the one who is going away. But do not worry. I hear federal prison has a great library. You can read all about property law while you serve your time." Blake lunged for the papers on the table. He tried to grab the deed to tear it up, but Leonard's associate was faster. He slammed his hand down on the documents. Blake froze. He looked at the door. He was thinking about running. "Don't bother," I said. Sirens wailed in the distance. They were getting louder. Coming up the hill. "I think your ride is here," I said. Blake Anderson slumped back against the table. He looked at his hands. The hands that had signed his own destruction. The party was over. The hangover was just beginning. The sound of the sirens was no longer a distant wail. It was a screaming reality right outside the front door. Blue and red lights flashed through the sheer curtains, cutting through the gloom of the dining room like strobe lights in a nightmare. But Blake Anderson was not looking at the window. He was looking at the yellowed document in Leonard's hand, as if it were a poisonous snake. "You are lying," Blake stammered. His voice was high and thin, cracking under the weight of his denial. "This is a trick. A cheap parlor trick. You cannot separate the land from the house. It is one property. It is my property. I have the deed. I just signed the deed." Leonard Katz did not shout. He did not pound the table. He simply adjusted his glasses and looked at Blake with the pity one reserves for a terminal patient who refuses to accept the diagnosis. In the state of Washington, Leonard began, his voice calm and precise as a scalpel. "Property rights are a bundle of sticks. You can sell one stick and keep the others. 6 years ago, Mr. Dalton severed the estate. He created a split interest. The structure is one entity. The land is another." Leonard stood up and walked around the table. He placed the trust document directly in front of Blake. He pointed to a paragraph in the middle of the page. "Read it, Mr. Anderson," Leonard commanded. "Read Clause 14, Section B." Blake looked down. His eyes darted across the page. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. I could see the tremor in his hands rattling the paper against the mahogany table. "The surface rights to the parcel known as 442 Queen Anne Drive are granted to the owner of the improvement solely for the duration of their blood lineage ownership," Blake read aloud. His voice shook. "Upon sale or transfer to any non-lineage entity, the surface rights immediately revert to the trust. The trust retains the right to demand immediate removal of any unauthorized improvements at the owner's expense." Blake stopped reading. He looked up. His face was the color of old ash. "Removal," he whispered. "That means eviction." "Blake," I said. I was still sitting down enjoying the show. "It means you just sold a house that is now legally trespassing on my daughter's land. You sold a $4 million mansion that has become a pile of bricks with zero value because it has no right to touch the ground it stands on." Blake slumped back in his chair. He looked at the purchase agreement he had just signed. The ink was still wet. "But I sold it," he said, his mind frantically trying to find an exit. "I sold it to the Olympus Fund. It is their problem now. I have the money, the wire transfer." He reached for his phone. "I need to check my account." "Go ahead," Leonard said. "Check it." Blake fumbled with his phone. He dropped it once, then picked it up with shaking fingers. He tapped the screen. He refreshed his banking app. "It is pending," he said. "The $5 million. It is there. It says pending." "It will stay pending forever," Leonard said. "Because at the exact moment you signed that warranty of title, you committed a felony." Leonard leaned in close, his shadow falling over Blake. "You warranted that you had clear, marketable title to the property," Leonard explained. "You certified that there were no undisclosed encumbrances. But there is a massive encumbrance: the trust. By signing that paper and accepting the wire transfer initiation, you committed bank fraud, wire fraud, and theft by deception." Blake shook his head violently. "I did not know. I did not know about the trust. It was a mistake." "Ignorance is not a defense when you are the fiduciary," Leonard countered. "You had power of attorney. It was your legal duty to know. But you were too busy stealing from the account to read the files, were you not?" Blake looked at Monica. She was standing by the window, her face pale. She was not looking at Blake. She was looking at the door, calculating the distance to the exit. Monica, Blake pleaded. "Tell them. Tell them we did not know." Monica took a step back. "I did not sign anything," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "This is your deal, Blake. I just live here. I do not know anything about your business." Blake's jaw dropped. The betrayal hit him harder than the legal arguments. "You spent the money," he screamed. "You bought the cars. You bought the jewelry. You knew everything." "I knew nothing," Monica shouted back. She looked at me, her eyes wide and innocent. "Mr. Dalton, surely you know. I was just an employee. I was just doing what he told me. I was a victim too." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound that stopped her dead. "A victim," I repeated. I stood up and walked toward her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the metal box from the safe. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy clatter. I opened the lid. The vials of haloperidol glinted in the flashing police lights. "A victim does not inject a woman with antipsychotics," I said. "A victim does not kick a defenseless girl when she is scrubbing the floor." "I have the recordings, Monica. I have the video from the hidden cameras. I have the logbook where you wrote down every dose you administered." Monica's face crumbled. She slumped against the wall, covering her face with her hands. I turned back to Blake. He was staring at the purchase agreement. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw the tears in his eyes. They were not tears of remorse. They were tears of a man who realizes he has lost the game. "Who is Olympus?" Blake asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Who did I sell the house to?" I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who has cornered the rabbit. "You really do not know, do you, Blake? You thought you were dealing with some faceless corporation, some algorithm in New York." I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I pulled out a folded document. The Articles of Incorporation for the Olympus Distressed Asset Fund. I threw it on the table on top of the deed. "Look at the signature of the managing director," I said. Blake looked. He squinted through his tears. Rexford Dalton, he read. He looked up at me, his mouth opening in shock. You, he gasped. You are Olympus. I am the buyer, Blake, I said. I am the one who offered you the $5 million. I am the one you tried to defraud. And I am the one who now owns your debt. I leaned both hands on the table, looming over him. You see, Blake, when you signed that agreement, you didn't just sell the house. You agreed to a standard indemnity clause. It means that if the seller, that is you, provides a fraudulent title, the seller is personally liable for all damages plus 3 times the value of the contract. I did the math for him. The contract was $5 million. Triple damages means $15 million, plus the original debt you owe the estate, plus the legal fees. I leaned closer until I was inches from his face. You work for me now, Blake. You are going to prison for 20 years for the fraud. And when you get out, every penny you earn for the rest of your miserable life belongs to me. You will never own a suit again. You will never own a car again. You will never even own the shoes on your feet because I will take them to pay off the interest on your debt. Blake began to hyperventilate. He tugged at his collar, trying to loosen the tie that was suddenly strangling him. No, he wheezed. No, this cannot be happening. I am Blake Anderson. I am a visionary. You are a tenant, I said, and your lease is up. The front door burst open, or burst. Heavy boots thundered into the foyer. Voices shouted. Federal agents. Nobody move. Hands where I can see them. 4 agents in windbreakers with FBI emblazoned on the back stormed into the dining room. They had their weapons drawn but lowered them when they saw the situation. Leonard Katz stepped forward. He pointed at Blake. That is your man, Leonard said. Blake Anderson. We have the signed confession of wire fraud right here on the table. 2 agents grabbed Blake. They hauled him out of the chair. He did not fight. His legs had turned to jelly. He hung between them like a sack of wet laundry. Wait, Blake screamed as they cuffed his hands behind his back. Wait, I can fix this. Rex, please. Dad, we can make a deal. I can work it off. I am a good earner. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had turned my daughter into a servant. The man who had mocked me. The man who had thought he was untouchable. I do not make deals with terrorists, I said. They dragged him toward the door. As he passed Sarah, he stopped. He dug his heels into the carpet. Sarah, he shouted. Sarah, tell them. Tell them I took care of you. Tell them we are a team. You love me, right? You signed the papers because you love me. The room went quiet. The agents paused, waiting to see if the victim would speak. Sarah stood up. She walked over to Blake. She looked him up and down. She looked at the handcuffs. She looked at the tear-stained ruin of his face. She did not flinch. She did not look at the floor. I was a maid in this house, Sarah said, her voice clear and strong. I cleaned your floors. I washed your dishes. I took your poison. She leaned in close so only he could hear. But I never loved you, Blake. I was just surviving you. And now... She reached out and plucked the silk pocket square from his suit jacket. She wiped a speck of dust from his lapel just like a maid would. Now I am taking out the trash. She dropped the pocket square on the floor and stepped back. Get him out of my house, Sarah said. The agents dragged him away. His screams echoed in the foyer, followed by the slam of the heavy front door. Monica was next. An agent approached her. Monica Stevens, he asked. She nodded, trembling. We have a warrant for your arrest as an accessory to fraud and elder abuse. They cuffed her. She did not scream. She just looked at me with dead eyes as they led her out. The room was suddenly quiet. The blue and red lights still flashed outside, but the siren had stopped. Leonard Katz began to gather the papers. He put the deed in his briefcase. He put the trust document back in his file. Well, Leonard said, snapping the briefcase shut. That went according to plan. I looked at him. Thank you, Leonard. Don't thank me, Leonard said, putting on his fedora. Thank the law. It is slow and it is ugly, but sometimes, just sometimes, it works. He nodded to Sarah. Mrs. Anderson. Or should I say Ms. Dalton? Ms. Dalton, Sarah said. Definitely Ms. Dalton. Leonard smiled. He tipped his hat and walked out, leaving us alone in the dining room. I looked at Sarah. She was standing by the table, her hand resting on the spot where Blake had signed his life away. She looked exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, and the reality of the trauma was setting in. But she was standing. I walked over to her. Are you okay? I asked. She looked around the room. She looked at the chandelier. She looked at the empty chairs. He is gone, she whispered. He is gone, I confirmed. He is never coming back. She looked at the floor where the pocket square lay. She picked it up. She walked over to the trash can in the corner and dropped it in. Dad, she said, turning to me. Yes. I am hungry, and I do not want to cook. I smiled. The first real smile I had felt in 6 years. Get your coat, I said. Let us go get some pancakes. And Sarah. She looked at me. You can wear shoes in the house now. She looked down at her bare feet. Then she looked up at me and smiled. I think I will buy some boots, she said. Big, heavy combat boots, just like yours. We walked out of the house together. We left the mess for the lawyers. We left the memories in the walls. We walked out into the rain, which had finally stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, and a single shaft of pale sunlight was hitting the Space Needle in the distance. We had a lot of work to do. We had to rebuild. But the foundation was solid. And the land was ours. The dining room was no longer a place of business. It was a crime scene processing unit. The federal agents moved with the precise mechanical efficiency of men who had done this 1,000 times before. They did not care about Blake Anderson's tears. They did not care about his shouting. To them, he was just another white-collar criminal who thought a suit was a shield against the law. I watched from the fireplace, my arms crossed over my chest. I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction settling in my bones. It was the feeling of a building finally coming down after the charges have been detonated. The dust was rising, but the structure was gone. Blake was on his knees. The arrogance that had defined him for years had evaporated, leaving behind a sobbing child. One agent was reading him his rights. You have the right to remain silent. Blake was not remaining silent. He was babbling. It was not me, he pleaded, looking desperately at Leonard Katz. It was the market. The market crashed. I was going to pay them back. I swear I was going to pay everyone back once the development in Belize came through. Leonard did not look up from his briefcase. He was methodically packing away the documents that had sealed Blake's fate. There is no development in Belize, Blake, Leonard said calmly. We checked. There is just a swamp and a shell company registered to your personal assistant. Blake turned his head and looked at Monica. She was standing near the door, handcuffed, flanked by a female agent. She was not crying. She was glaring at Blake with pure, unadulterated hatred. You set me up, Monica hissed. You told me it was legal. You told me the lawyers signed off on everything. Blake laughed, a wet, hysterical sound. You injected my wife with antipsychotics, Monica. Do not pretend you are innocent. You enjoyed it. I saw you smiling every time you pushed that needle in. The female agent tightened her grip on Monica's arm. Let us go, she said. Wait, Sarah said. Her voice cut through the noise of the room like a bell. The agent stopped. Everyone looked at the woman in the blue dress. Sarah walked across the room. She moved slowly, but her steps were steady. She stopped in front of Monica. She looked into the eyes of the woman, who had been her tormentor, her jailer, and her nurse for 3 years. Sarah leaned in close. She did not raise her voice. "Do you remember what you told me?" Sarah asked. "When I begged you for water. When I begged you to stop the spiders from crawling on the walls." Monica looked away, refusing to meet her gaze. "You told me that pain was the only thing that was real," Sarah continued. "You told me that I deserved it because I was weak." Sarah reached out and touched the handcuffs on Monica's wrists. The cold metal clicked against her fingernail. "You were wrong," Sarah said. "I was not weak. I was just waiting. And now you are going to a place where there are no servants to bring you water. I hope you remember every drop you denied me." "Get her out of here," Sarah said, turning her back on Monica. The agents led Monica out. She did not scream. She just looked at Sarah with a look of pure terror, as if she had finally realized that the broken doll had teeth. Then it was Blake's turn. 2 agents hauled him to his feet. He could barely stand. His legs were jelly. He looked at me. "Rex, please," he begged. "Dad. Look at all we built. You cannot let them take me. I am family." I walked over to him. I looked him up and down. I saw the fear in his eyes. It was the same fear I had seen in Sarah's eyes for days. "You are not family, Blake," I said. "You are a structural defect, and I just condemned the building." "Take him away," I told the agents. "No," Blake screamed as they dragged him toward the door. "Sarah, help me. I love you. I love you, baby." Sarah did not look at him. She walked over to the window and watched as they shoved him into the back of an unmarked sedan. She watched as the heavy door slammed shut, severing him from her life forever. She stood there for a long time, watching the taillights fade into the gray Seattle afternoon. The silence returned to the house. But this time it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a storm that has finally blown itself out. Leonard Katz walked over to me. He extended his hand. "We will handle the arraignment," Mr. Dalton, Leonard said. "You do not need to come to the station today. Take care of your daughter." "Thank you, Leonard," I said, shaking his hand. "Send the bill to the usual account." Leonard smiled. "This one is on the house, Rex. It was a pleasure to watch a master at work." He tipped his hat to Sarah and walked out, closing the front door behind him. I looked at Sarah. She was still standing by the window. Her shoulders were shaking. I walked over and put my hand on her shoulder. "It is over," I said. She turned to me and buried her face in my chest. She did not cry. She just held on tight, as if to make sure I was real. "I am hungry," she whispered against my coat. I smiled. "Me too, kid. Me too." 6 months is a long time in the construction business. In 6 months, you can tear down a skyscraper and pour a new foundation. You can rewrite the skyline. But rebuilding a human being takes longer. I sat on the back porch of the Queen Anne estate, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the sea. The house was different now. The heavy velvet curtains were gone, replaced by sheer linen that let the light flood in. The dark, oppressive furniture Blake had favored was in a landfill somewhere. The walls were painted a soft, warm cream. The basement door was gone. We had removed it the day after the arrest. I had turned that room into a wine cellar, a place of celebration, not incarceration. I heard the sliding glass door open behind me. Sarah walked out carrying a tray with 2 mugs of tea. She was wearing jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt. Her hair had grown out shiny and thick, tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired, but it was a good kind of tired. The tiredness of a day spent creating, not surviving. She set the tray down on the small table between us and sat in the wicker chair. "Here you go," she said, handing me a mug. "Earl Grey, 2 sugars." "Thanks," I said, taking a sip. It was hot and sweet. She picked up a roll of blueprints she had brought out with her. She unrolled them on her lap, smoothing the paper with strong, steady hands. I finished the sketches for the community center, Sarah said. I think the atrium needs more glass. I want people to see the sky. I looked at the drawings. They were brilliant, sharp, confident lines, the work of an architect who had found her vision again. It looks perfect, I said. You should submit it tomorrow. Maybe, she said, tracing a line with her finger. I am still not sure about the entrance. It feels too guarded. It is okay to be guarded, Sarah, I said gently. Defenses are good, as long as you have a key to let the right people in. She looked at me. Her eyes were clear. The shadows were still there deep down, but they were receding. She reached out and took my hand. Did you hear from the lawyers today? She asked. I nodded. Blake took the plea deal. 20 years, no parole. He is in a federal facility in Oregon. Monica got 10. They are gone, Sarah. Really gone. She squeezed my hand. And the debt. Paid, I said. The Olympus Fund has officially forgiven the loan. You own the house free and clear. You own the land. You own your life. She smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. I could not have done it without you, Dad, she said. You came back. I will always come back, I said. I am the contractor, remember? I do not leave until the job is done. She leaned back in her chair, looking out at the city lights twinkling below. I think the job is done, she said softly. Now we just have to live in the house. We sat there in silence, watching the stars come out. I looked at my daughter. She was scarred, yes. She would always carry the memory of those 3 years. But she was standing. She was building. She was a Dalton. I took a sip of tea. The war was over. The enemy was defeated. And for the first time in a long time, I did not need to check the perimeter. I could just sit here and watch the lights. This is Rexford Dalton signing off. Remember, family is the structure you build, not the one you are born into. And if someone tries to tear it down, you do not just repair it. You reinforce it. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments below, what is the one thing you would fight for, no matter the cost? Until next time, stay vigilant.